So I've been hearing the term Giphy lately. What does that refer to?
So Giphy's a term that sort of cropped up recently. It stands for Google Infrastructure for Everyone Else.
Mm.
It's that idea that, well, Google's a pretty amazing place. They've built a lot of technology internally because they had to solve their own problems. But now a lot of that is being open sourced, like Kubernetes or like TensorFlow, or like the Go programming language that's suddenly like hot everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's influencing other software. So the sort of Borg paper led to things like Mesos being created. There's things like Prometheus is very much closely modeled on a monitoring system that was available within Google. And there's this big impact and influence on modern infrastructure software coming from Google. Everyone wants to have Google's infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. So Google seems to know what it's doing. What are the benefits to adopting a lot of technologies that were formed in the course of Google solving their large-scale problems?
I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that Google were way ahead of the curve in solving distributed systems problems. Like they hit those problems before the rest of us, especially now with sort of people pushing into sort of microservices and containers. Like the rest of us are hitting those distributed systems problems, and there are already solutions. We don't have to solve everything ourselves.
Mm-hmm. What would be some downsides to say your organization is considering adopting these tools? What would be some concerns about rushing towards that?
This was sort of the topic of my talk, in that I was talking about both the enthusiasm and the pros, but also the fact that your organization probably doesn't look like Google. Google's a 60,000 person or so large company. A lot of that is based in the US, and a lot of it's based in sort of in Valley. And something like, I think, 50% of the people at Google are in programming or software engineering or software development or operations type roles. That's definitely not the same sort of like model that most organizations have. And there's that meme of, well, all companies are becoming software companies. Does that mean all companies end up with 50% of their people as sort of programmers of some stripe? Because I think the last sort of census data from the US was like less than 1% of people in the job market are programmers. So if we need 50% of all companies to be, where do they all come from? Maybe there's other ways that we need to scale organizations that aren't just copying what Google worked for Google.
Or treating every problem as a software engineering problem.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So in the velocity context, we talk a lot about new tools and also the new practices and kind of cultural challenges of adopting new tools and new practices. And in Bridget Cromote's talk yesterday, she said, containers will not fix your broken culture. What do you think is a good way to navigate that twin challenge of adopting new tools and also having the right mindset and workflow to actually use them effectively?
Yeah, I actually even quoted Bridget saying that in my talk, but I also sort of said the reverse is probably true, that amazing culture will not fix your broken containers. And some of this gets into a field of research called socio-technical systems, which I think there's loads to sort of bring to the velocity audience and some of that's around, like, you can try and adopt new technology simply by adopting it. You can try and change like sort of culture and practices and processes just by changing them. But most of the systems that we're part of they're socio-technical. There is a technical component and a people squishy component. And the reality of change, of evolution, is you probably need to evolve both hand in hand. You can't just take software off the shelf and that's been used by Google and suddenly become Google. And you can't just take practices like the sort of site reliability engineering sort of practices and apply them straight away to a traditional mainframe environment in a totally different context.
Gotcha. So to focus more on the technical side, I mean, where do you see infrastructure tools heading over the next several years?
I think there's lots going on with infrastructure tooling, in particular around sort of containers, and now the sort of higher level orchestrators and management tooling around that. I think there's sort of nearly an explosion of pieces at the moment. I think what we'll see is sort of some level of consolidation, like some tooling that deals with the messiness of running things in production.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of focus, often in sort of like cyclic sort of way, on getting up and running, on deploying. We talk like we get carried away with sort of the deploying problem, but actually most systems are running, not constantly in sort of being changed. And so, what does the sort of that day two operations is sort of a term that often gets banded around. I think we'll see a lot more focus on that for containers as they sort of move from being used in sort of the sort of like smaller startup or reasonably like sort of like happy to take risk environments into other ones as well.
I see. Further on that point, what are some projects and people you've been following lately that you think are particularly interesting now?
Yeah, there's always just so much happening. It's always hard to keep up. I think the sort of renewed interest in programming languages is quite interesting. And there's obviously Go mentioned, but also Rust and Kotlin as well, the sort of new JVM languages that are sort of nearly like Go for the JVM. But also the work that Facebook's been doing with OCaml and a bunch of other things. We seem to be heading to a world where it's many more programming languages than it certainly looked like it would be a bunch of years ago. I think another good area is machine learning. It's been the sort of secret sauce, if you like, of organizations like Google and Amazon for a long time.
Machine learning for systems data.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, just as an approach to building systems.
I see.
Nearly the idea that, well, teach the computer how to deal with the problem rather than tell the computer how to deal with it.
I see. Yep.
And so I think the frameworks around machine learning and that becoming maybe a bit more democratized with things like TensorFlow, like that'll be interesting to watch.
I see. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.